Welcome from my side. So let's talk about air filtration recommendations in times of COVID-19. So first of all, how can air filters actually contribute to that, and how can they mitigate the spread of the COVID virus? As Marcus mentioned earlier, the airborne transmission of the virus is now conclusively stated and confirmed by most organizations. And also this is the case also in the REVA guidance document that has been mentioned earlier. Last version has been published on August 3rd. So this is the up-to-date status. And in this document, you find actually 3 types of transmission of COVID-19 viruses through droplets or aerosols. And we have actually the short-term range, which is visible droplets, and they are normally created by coughing or sneezing in a distance of 1 to 2 meters. That's why social distancing is important. The second part is a medium range, where we have smaller droplets, less than 50 microns, that have actually a wider reach than 1 to 2 meters. And the most important one for us in the ventilation industry is the aerosols. So we're talking about very small droplets, less than 5 microns in diameter. And they are able to travel much further and can be actually transported by a recirculation system or by ventilation system in general. To visualize that, we have here a nice graphic from the WHO, where you can see droplet transmission on the visible part. Then we have the intermediate area with smaller droplets. And on the right-hand side, you see the very tiny particles, less than 5 microns, the so-called aerosols. And they are responsible for the airborne transmission because they can be transported over quite long distances. So looking again at what do the REVA guidelines actually say and what recommendations do they give? In total, these guidelines have 15 checkpoints to optimize your ventilation system for COVID-19. And actually 8 of these, there were 8 we see here on the left-hand side. Yes?
Sorry, I have to interrupt. I hear a telephone ringing.
It's not on my side.
That's very weird. Thank you. It has stopped. I don't know where it came from.
So it's definitely not here. Good. Okay. So 8 of these checkpoints are directly related to filtration. And if you look at them, you will see it's not easy to follow all of them, especially in the climatic conditions of Middle East, because switching off the recirculation air completely and only bring in supply air is not always an option. So what can be done? The other option, if you need recirculation air, is to improve the filtration of that recirculation air. The recommendation from REVA says use a HEPA filter in there. Well, this is again easier said than done, because not all recirculation systems will be able to take the additional pressure drop that a HEPA filter will bring to the system. If you can do it, good solution. But many cases that will be difficult to do. So in this case, the best practical solution will then to upgrade the filtration in the recirculation system to at least a filter class of, according ISO 16890, of EPM1 80% as a final filter stage to bring a sufficient reduction of aerosols in the system. So what is ISO 16890? ISO 16890 is actually the latest and up-to-date air filtration standard for normal ventilation air filters. It fully replaced the EN 779 in 2018. So there's no more classes like F7, F8, F9 that doesn't exist anymore. The new classes, according ISO 16890, would be EPM 160%, EPM 170, or 80%, meaning a filter would filter out 60, 70, or 80% of particles below 1 micron. So let's first look at supply air, because the REVA guidance actually says bring as much supply air in as possible. But how should you filter your supply air? For that, there is a very good recommendation from Eurovent, the Eurovent recommendation 423. And this is applicable not only in times of COVID, this is a general recommendation. And it works in different steps. First, it classifies the supply air quality, as you can see here on this one page from the recommendation. Let's assume we're talking about an office building. An office building would be a room for permanent occupation. So the recommended supply air quality would be supply air quality 2. The next question is, of course, where is your building located? How clean is the outdoor air? As office buildings are normally in cities, we should assume that the outdoor air quality will not be perfect. So we should assume outdoor air 2 or 3 as a quality. And there we end up directly with a recommendation for which filters to use. And if you look at these two recommendations, you will see in both cases, the recommendation would be to use an EPM 160 filter as a final filter in the supply air, plus a good pre-filter to protect your system from hopefully not looking like some of the pictures we've seen in the last presentation. If you want to learn more about how the choice of filter classes works in your specific system, there's an online calculation tool available down here on that website that you can use free of charge, where you can model your building, including air changes, recirculation rates, and you can choose different filter classes. And it will give you an indication how the filters would influence the indoor air quality. This calculator is based on a scientific study done by Professor Lars Ekberg from Sweden. And as said, this calculator is available free of charge on this website here. So, but let's come back to recirculation air, because that's where the main problem occurs with COVID-19 and possible aerosol transmission. We see here an overview of different filter classes. You see EPM 160, EPM 170, and EPM 180 and 85 filters. And you can see their actual efficiency against different particle sizes. As said, aerosols are below 5 microns and can go down below 0.5. So let's take worst case here. Let's look at the small particles, 0.3 to 0.4, which would be very small aerosols. And now you can see that an EPM 160 filter would at least have a 50% efficiency at these sizes. And the bigger the droplets are, the higher the efficiency would be. You see, up to more than 70 if we're getting close to 1 micron. Same logic for EPM 170, starting at around 60%, going up above 80. Is that enough? For supply air, yes. For recirculation air, you should at least use an EPM 180. And you can see that easily from these results here. We're talking about very small aerosol droplets. Those filters would take out 80% at 0.3 to 0.4 microns. And at 1 micron, we are above 95% efficiency. So for recirculation air, if you cannot avoid it, use at least a EPM 180 filter. That's why. We have here shown in a different way on this diagram. We can see on the x-axis, again, particle size in micrometers, and on the y-axis, percentage of filtration efficiency. And down here, we see some viruses, and in case of tuberculosis, a bacteria. So we see the different size ranges. The COVID-19 virus is somewhere in between 0.08 and 0.16 microns. And as you can see from that graph here, if you look at the light green or the blue graph, which would represent a PM 2.5 filter, former M5, M6, you can easily see that the efficiency at small particle sizes is definitely not enough to give you sufficient protection. The dark green would be represent an EPM 160. And up here in black, you see an EPM 190, and EPM 180 would be slightly below that. And that's why you can easily see only as of PM 180 or higher, you would get a good protection against small droplets or even single viruses. If you want to go the whole way and make the perfect solution, you're here at the red line, which is an H13 filter, which nearly brings you 100% efficiency. I will come to it more in detail because it's not 100%, it's just close to 100%. So what can you do? As said, it will be difficult to get HEPA filters in the recirculation air in many cases. And if your building, for instance, is not using a central air handling unit, but uses fan coil units or other applications which do not give you the possibility to bring in high-end filters, the other solution to improve the indoor air quality would be the use of air cleaners. This is also recommended in the REWA guidance documents. And there is a clear recommendation, not surprising, to use air cleaners with HEPA filters. So what should you look at if you select an air cleaner for your room? Look at the technology standards. Do, for instance, the filters really fulfill the latest standards? For a HEPA filter, that's EN 8022. So, and of course, our components in the units, are they actually certified? What is the clean air delivery rate of that air cleaner? Is it actually sized correctly for that room? And an important one, does the air cleaner create any foreign substances like ozone is created in some cases, which is also in a certain concentration hazardous to people? You should avoid that. So that's why most reliable technology for an air cleaner in general, and especially in times of COVID-19, would be the use of a real HEPA filter. So what is a HEPA filter and how does this filtration actually work? I will give you a very brief overview of filtration efficiencies and the different types of filtration that exist, because filtration is not one physical thing, it's a number of different effects. On this diagram again, we have particle sizes here on the x-axis, and we have filtration efficiency. And you can see we start very high at 99.3 and go up to 100. Because we're going to look at how does a HEPA filter actually work. If you think about filtration, many people just think about impaction, straining, sedimentation effects, the ones that's visualized here on the right-hand side, which works more or less like sieve. But that's only part of the truth, because these effects only work at bigger particles. You see, it starts somewhere at 1 micron, and the bigger it gets, the better the efficiency is. What we want to filter in that case is much smaller particles. To do that, you use another effect, the so-called interception, which could have been seen also on some pictures in the last presentation. Small particles getting stuck to the fibers of the filter. And this interception works down to, definitely below 1 micron, down to 0.1005, but obviously decreasing. And as the last part of filtration is a so-called diffusion effect, which you can see here in red. Very small particles have a strong tendency to move randomly in the airflow and then stick to the fibers of the filter. All these effects together give the total efficiency of a filter. And the efficiency curve of a filter more or less looks always like this green line. And you can see here you have a U-shaped curve with a minimum. And as we're talking about HEPA filters, high efficient filtration, we always test a filter at its minimum, the minimum of the curve, and that's the so-called MPPS, most penetrating particle size. So if you have an H13, which has a proven efficiency of 99.95% at MPPS, you can be absolutely sure that at any size of your particle, it will be 99.95 or better. In that case here, I drafted here the COVID-19 virus, somewhere between 0.8 and 1.6. And you can see that at this size, the filtration efficiency is even higher. So having said that, by using a real H13 filter according AEN 8022, you have very good efficiency, 99.95%, both at MPPS as well as even on a single virus. What's important to say about HEPA filters, and that's one of the last things before I'm over with my presentation. If you purchase an air cleaner with HEPA filters, make sure it's a real HEPA filter according EN 8022. The reason why I'm saying that, there are products on the market using so-called HEPA-like filters or like HEPA or true HEPA or whatever other creative wording they're using, those filters are not HEPA. This might sound a little picky, but I will show you in a short movie how the difference could look like. We tested here 2 products. The one here we see here is a real HEPA filter according EN 22, and this is a so-called HEPA. And we put those in the same test duct, turned on some artificial smoke, and as you can easily see, the HEPA filters out everything. The so-called HEPA doesn't do it. So when you choose an air purifier, an air cleaner, make sure it comes with a real HEPA filtration. So here, coming close to the end of my presentation, in a nutshell, the key recommendations for filtration in COVID-19 times would be supply air pre-filter, of course, plus EPM 160 in the supply air, recirculation, at least EPM 180, if you cannot avoid to use it. And if you cannot achieve good filtration by that, the use of air cleaner would be a very good alternative. Thank you. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Tobias. Excellent presentation. Right, one question up front would be, how do we make sure it is a real HEPA filter? I mean, what can people do in order to make sure it is a real HEPA filter?
First of all, it needs to be confirmed, of course, by the manufacturer, and HEPA filters come with a scan test protocol, as we've seen on one of the slides, so that you can really see, was that filter tested? Is it a real HEPA? So and if the manufacturer is not able to show a test certificate or to confirm that this is really HEPA according EN 1822, then you should be very suspicious and you have probably something with a so-called HEPA in front of you.
That means the people should always watch out for this scan test.
The scan test report, and of course a clear confirmation H13 or H14, not just the word HEPA. HEPA means it's H13 according EN 1822 or H14 according EN 1822. Anything else, if that's not clearly confirmed, this is no HEPA.
And I also have a quick question from one of our attendees. Is there a comparison between ASHRAE MERV categories and the ISO 16890 standards?
There's not a strict one-to-one comparison, but if you want to compare it, the best thing would be to go for the ASHRAE MERV A rating. There is a MERV rating that includes electrostatic charge and a MERV A rating without charge. If a filter comes with a MERV A rating, then you could say a MERV 13A is about EPM 160. A MERV 14A is about EPM 180.